James Joseph Richardson was a farm worker working on an orange grove in the small southern Florida town of Arcadia. He had 5 children with his wife, Annie Mae Richardson. Annie also had 2 children from a previous marriage, and they raised the 7 children together, who ranged in ages from 2 to 8. James and Annie both had full-time jobs, so a neighbor, Bessie Reese, took care of the children while they worked. On October 25, 1967, the older 4 children went to school, while the youngest 3 children stayed with Bessie. At lunchtime, the 4 children returned home from school to Bessie and their siblings to eat lunch. They ate a meal of rice and beans that had been prepared early that morning by their mother. At the school, their teachers noticed the kids were showing strange symptoms, and the principal immediately took them to the hospital. One of the teachers went to check on the 3 children at home and found them to be sick as well, and they were also taken to the hospital. James and Annie were notified that just one of their kids was ill and that a parent was needed to come to the hospital. When they arrived at the hospital, 6 of the 7 children were already dead. The 7th child would die the next day. It was believed that all the children died from poisoning. The police immediately searched the Richardson home to look for any evidence relating to the children's death. After much searching, the police did not find anything that was indicative of a poison, except an insect spray which they did not believe was the cause of the children's poisoning. The next day, Bessie notified the police that a bag of the insecticide parathion had been found in a shed by a neighbor, Charlie Smith. The officers agreed that the bag of parathion had not been there the day before when the premises had been searched 5 times. They thought that whoever had placed the parathion sack was probably also the person who had poisoned the children. Later, tests of the children's lunch plates and other items in the kitchen revealed the presence of enough parathion to kill everybody in a large city. 2 days after the funeral of the children, Klein, one of the investigators, charged James with 7 counts of murder in the 1st degree. Although Bessie was the last person to handle the plates and food before it was eaten by the children, she was not investigated as a suspect. Some people believed that Klein was just looking for a big break to have his name noticed in the police department. During the trial, Klein accused James of having 5 other children who had died under mysterious circumstances in another Florida city, and that his motive for this crime was to collect the insurance money on the children, although this was never proven. The judge provided evidence of Annie Mae and James both taking lie detector tests, which indicated that James had knowledge of the poisoning. Daytona Beach attorney John Robinson became interested in Richardson's case, and he and his partner agreed to represent the lawyerless Richardson pro bono. John believed that the case was being handled unfairly, as the judge constantly claimed that Richardson was guilty. While he was held at the county jail, James confided to John that Officer Klein had repeatedly called him the N-word and told him to plead guilty to get an easier sentence. After finding no evidence that could indicate James was guilty, John was able to drop his bail from $100,000 down to $7,500. James was released on bail. But shortly after James's release, a prisoner facing criminal charges claimed that in the county jail, James had admitted to him that he had killed the children. James's bail was revoked, and soon 2 other prisoners facing charges claimed that he had also confessed to them. James was jailed again, and his trial was moved to another county, despite John's attempts to move the trial to a different, more fair county. At the trial, 2 of the jailhouse informants testified about what James allegedly told them. Both of the informants received reductions in their prison sentences for testifying. The 3rd informant had been shot to death prior to the trial, but his statement was read to the jury. On May 31, 1968, after less than 2 hours of deliberation, James was convicted and sentenced to death in Florida's electric chair. James was on death row for nearly 5 years until the U.S. Supreme Court, in 1972, ruled that the death penalties in the U.S. at the time were unconstitutional. His sentence was commuted to life in prison, with eligibility for parole in 1993. In 1988, lawyers for James were able to secure James a new trial. The lawyers stated that Bessie Reese was living in an assisted living home with Alzheimer's disease and reportedly admitted to the murders hundreds of times, but no one ever took her seriously due to her mental illness. It was also found that Bessie Reese was a convicted murderer. She had apparently killed her ex-husband using poison and was on parole at the time of the children's murders. There was evidence of a cover-up by Sheriff Frank Klein, State Attorney Frank Schwab, and the local judge, a charge they denied. Moreover, the only living jailhouse informant had recanted their story, saying that he had been offered a lighter sentence in return for the testimony. On April 25, 1989, a judge set aside James's conviction, ruling that the suppressed evidence had prevented him from giving a fair trial, and James was released from prison. Bessie died of Alzheimer's disease in 1992 without being prosecuted for the crime. James later filed a wrongful conviction lawsuit against DeSoto County that was settled for $150,000. In June 2014, Florida Governor Rick Scott signed a bill authorizing payment of more than $1 million to James for wrongful conviction compensation. Timothy Evans. Timothy John Evans was born in 1924 in Wales. He grew up without his biological father and reportedly suffered from health issues that caused him to miss much of school. As a result, he never learned to read or write properly. In 1939, Timothy moved to London's Notting Hill district. There he met Beryl Thorley in 1946, and they married a year later. When Beryl fell pregnant, they moved to 10 Rellington Place. With the baby's birth, Timothy was finding it very difficult to support his family on a van driver's wage. When Beryl became pregnant for the second time, she decided to get an abortion, even though it was illegal at that time. A few weeks later, Timothy alerted the police that Beryl had died of unusual circumstances. During questioning, Timothy confessed that he had accidentally killed his wife by giving her something in a bottle that a man had given him to abort the fetus, and that he disposed of the body down a drain. However, when the police searched the drain, they couldn't find anything. Police questioned Timothy again, and he changed his story. This time, he said that his downstairs neighbor, John Christie, had offered to perform an abortion on Beryl. On the day of the abortion, when Evans returned from work, Christie told him that the abortion was unsuccessful and that Beryl had died during the operation. He told police that initially he did not tell the truth because he didn't want to go to jail, as abortion was illegal. He claimed that after Beryl's death, Christie told him to leave London and told him that he would take care of the body as well as make arrangements for another couple to look after his daughter, Geraldine. Timothy said that when he returned back to London, he asked about Geraldine, his daughter, but Christie refused to let him see her. After this statement, the police searched the property, and during the search they found the decomposing bodies of Beryl and Geraldine, wrapped in tablecloths, hidden in a small wash house. Both of them had been strangled to death. Timothy was charged with the murder of his wife and daughter after he allegedly confessed to the crime. During the trial, Timothy recanted his confession and pleaded his innocence. He stated that he confessed because he believed the police would beat him up if he didn't own up to the crime. He said that Christie was the murderer, but Christie denied the accusations. It took the jury just 40 minutes to pronounce Timothy guilty and sentence him to death. After a failed appeal, Timothy was hanged in Pentonville Prison 3 months later, maintaining his innocence until the end. 3 years later, Christie moved out of 10 Rillington Place after finding it hard to pay the rent. The landlord allowed an upstairs tenant, Beresford Brown, to use Christie's kitchen. Brown was putting up a shelf when he found the wall to be hollow. There, hidden in a papered-over kitchen pantry, were 3 bodies. The police were called in, and after searching, 3 more bodies were found under the floorboards of the apartment, of which one was Christie's own wife, Ethel. In total, 6 bodies were found in the apartment. Christie was arrested on March 31, 1953, and on June 22, 1953, he was put on trial in the same court Timothy Evans had been tried just 3 years prior. At the trial, he confessed to killing Beryl Evans. However, he never admitted to killing Geraldine Evans. Christie was found guilty of murdering his wife and the other woman and was hanged on July 15, 1953. Although Christie was found guilty of Ethel's murder, Timothy's own murder conviction was still upheld after an inquiry. However, a campaign to overturn the outcome was waged by both the press and Timothy's sister. The outcry over Timothy Evans' case contributed to the suspension and then abolition of capital punishment in the United Kingdom. In 1966, Timothy Evans was given a royal pardon, and after 37 years, in 2003, his sister and his half-sister received compensation for the miscarriage of justice.